How are you guys feeling after last night's game?
My God.
No
I have to
comment.
watch it today still, but yeah.
No, you don't. You don't need to watch anything.
And welcome to Light Years. Andy Lou, how frustrated are you still after last night?
I actually blocked it out of my memory. One of the good things about being a Warriors fan is I only think about the good things. So I'm living in the past right now.
Overall, last 10 years, the good has outweighed the bad. But yeah, we have a special guest today, Mark Schindler. You may have heard him on the Daily Ding. You may have read his draft scouting stuff over the years. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm really good. Appreciate you guys having me on. I'm psyched to be here.
Awesome. So I wanted to invite you on because I want to say a week or so ago, may have been 10 days, you and Sam Vecini, who we've had on the show many times, kind of had a really good conversation about James Wiseman and kind of how it's just not working with the Warriors. Fit, he needs minutes, and it's kind of juxtaposes the goals of the team. And then, what happens a few days later? Well, they decide to send him to Santa Cruz. So I kind of want to start there. Do you think there's even any benefit for him going to Santa Cruz at this point? Or is this just kind of one of those situations? Well, we all know they're going to split up at some point. It's a question of if it's going to be this season or we're going to let this dance go on for longer.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the one hand, you kind of have to send him to Santa Cruz, just regardless of even if he's going to be with you long term. That's a great way to piss off agents if you're not sending a guy somewhere to actually get playing time. So on that hand, I think he needs to, just because any reps are good reps as far as I'm concerned for him right now. And then, as speaking on the later part, if they wait until next year to make a move, I think that's ridiculous. I think I would have, even with them winning the title last year, I still wish that they had potentially made a move that would have secured them better for this year as well. Which, not to we don't need to relitigate or rehash that, but I do think looking at where they're at right now is kind of a byproduct of that. So I think pushing that on another year would be a massive mistake.
Yeah, I feel like, winning the title last year and, just Steph specifically was just brilliant against Boston, really kind of the signature performance of his career. Very easy to bask in the post-title glow and somewhat ignore the fact that the roster is a bunch of guys under 21 who need development minutes and a bunch of guys 30 or over who are kind of this is our time. We have 1 year, 2 year, 3 years left. We're going for it. And kind of, I feel like that's the story of the first 15 games here, just how they're not aligned. They're not aligned as a team and what they want to do. Is that what you're seeing? Or because it seems to me let me put it this way. It seems to me they thought Kuminga, for example, could replace GP2. He has the physical tools to be kind of that point of attack defender. And then offensively, just, cut and kind of crash the glass and, just kind of use his athleticism and energy to affect the game. It makes sense on paper, but it ignores the fact that he's a human who has probably been the best player on every team he's been on his entire life up to this point. And you're asking him kind of, to be a role player instead of be the man.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, part of my struggles this year with Kuminga, because I don't want to he hasn't played awesome this year. I think there's still been flashes of really good stuff. But it's just been harder, and this is not meant directly as a dig at Wiseman, but by virtue of trying to work in both of them at the same time, they still have kind of the same problems, both of them really needing to improve their feel for the game. That's been disastrous for the bench minutes. Kuminga went from mainly playing as a 4 or 5 last year, and I think that's where he thrived most. To having to play a little bit more of the 3 this year, which I was very much in the train of thinking he needed to be a 4 or 5 long term, unless some things really happened with his offensive development. And again, it's less about positionality and more just where his skill set is at right now. When you take, to me, removing GP2 and I'm blanking on everyone else from last year, all of the players who just from 6 through 10 who made really good decisions. I think it's the kind of thing where, because they weren't always scoring or it wasn't always highlight plays. I think Gary obviously made a lot of those, but even when Belly could play 8 minutes and it's okay, this is fine. like, granted, you don't want him to have a massive role, but it's more like, okay, he's so good at putting everyone else in the right spots and just being part of the scheme without being damaging. And just, I think when you can mask one or two guys who are trying to work into the rotation and figure that stuff out. But when you're trying to, build an entire bench unit around it to start the year, yeah, it's been awful.
Bielitsa would be their best bench player right now, and he was probably on the fringes of the rotation last season. I want to talk about Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, Wiseman, we know ad nauseum, and he's chilling in Santa Cruz right now. But Kuminga is, to me, almost ready to play himself in the rotation. What I guess, what are your thoughts on him? I know you just talked about him kind of being promising. So I guess, what are your thoughts on him as a prospect?
Yeah, honestly, like, I loved what they did with him last year, because my biggest, saying fear is the wrong way to put it, but like, my biggest thing coming out of the draft was I really just don't want somebody to try and be like, this is a big wing, he's going to take a bunch of shots and carry usage for us, because he's not ready for that right now. Like, those were things that he struggled with in the G League when he played his year there. And I think, like, again, like, if things really work out, maybe he becomes somebody who can do more of that. But to me, it's more how they used him last year. Like, okay, we're going to use you as a hyper athletic roller, and just trying to work in the offense as a cutter. Well, obviously the goal is working on a shot and being able to attack closeouts and figure stuff out from there. Like, finding like little ways to improve his decision making and just how he sees the game. And then using him defensively like they did. Like, I thought part of what made him fascinating defensively, playing alongside Draymond, like, I thought he was just way more engaged and active defensively than we saw a lot of times from him in high school or playing with Ignite. And I think that's a massive, sorry, my dog loves Jonathan Kuminga too, but I think part of that is like a byproduct of, sorry, one sec. I think part of that is like a byproduct of just being able to play with good vets who know how to play defense.
And that kind of gets to our, kind of the point you were making off the top, which is like, it's not about any one specific young player. Like, I tend to side with both of you on this one, where like, if I had to prioritize one, I think Kuminga has probably got the highest ceiling of the bunch in terms of fitting into what the Warriors want to do, particularly defensively. Like, he's not that far away from at least being able to play a role defensively for the Warriors the way they like to play, as a big wing who's versatile enough to guard multiple positions, in theory anyway. But it's the fact that they try to insert all of them at the same time. That's the problem. Like, last year, the fan base would often like groan when Damian Lee would get minutes over a Moses Moody or a Jonathan Kuminga. Damian Lee, journeyman, vet, not exciting. Like, whereas the young player, oh, he could be a superstar. It's obvious why fans would want to see that player. But when you watch the bench play without any guys like that, just guys who know their role, play smart off of each other, this is in some ways what it looks like. And that was a player that they just let walk last year that like could probably help them out in some capacity this year.
Or you might have muted. Or the mic is gone.
There, okay, there, we're good. My
Boom.
bad.
There we go.
My dog was still barking in the background, so I was keeping it safe. But I think even for Phoenix, you're seeing how good Damian's been for them. Like, again, like he can spot start like we saw at times last year, and it's not sexy, but it's just he makes really good plays. He's like randomly very good at attacking the offensive glass and just sneaking in for garbage baskets. And I think those are the kind of things that the team misses, especially on the bench right now.
Steve Kerr let everyone know yesterday they played with no grit, no, he used basically every cliche, so it's just open run out there. But he was looking at that and he saw Damian Lee get 8 rebounds, and outside of Steph Curry, none of his perimeter players hit the glass in any capacity last night. And that's just kind of an effort thing in some ways.
Yeah. I think it's tough too, because like it's effort, but it's also like assertiveness and like knowing how to put yourself out there. And I think like that's part of the stuff that I think, again, like we saw flashes of Kuminga really do that last year, but he does have kind of a tendency to float, especially when when he's not optimized in certain situations. And like, again, like that's stuff that needs to come along. But yeah, exactly. Like those are the things that, to me, like whenever I watch the Warriors, like they just look slower this year because of like they're not like their pace of play has gone down or anything, but it's just I pointed this out last year when they played the Nuggets. Like everyone roasted the Nuggets defense, and I think fairly, because their defense was terrible in that series. But to me, it was so much more of the Warriors just move the ball so fast, and more because they know where to be. Like it's like a well-oiled machine, which again, coaching cliche, but like it's just not the same this year because you don't have all the pieces and parts and that make it run like that.
Yeah. It's crazy that it's shocking the amount of IQ that you lose simply just by not having guys that have played basketball for 10 years. Like, I wouldn't even argue that Damian Lee's the smartest basketball player, but as compared to Jonathan Kuminga, dude is Albert Einstein on the court. And I think like that's just what you run into when you write a lot of stuff on these draft players. Like, how it's not often that players come and just ready to know how to play. It's just not. It's not Anthony Edwards is. I mean, we're talking about the last few drafts. Anthony Edwards is, we think is going to be superstar. Talented. Yeah, I don't think he's taking that big of a leap this season, but he's going to average 20 plus points for the rest of his career, 25. But I wouldn't say he's a smart player. Like, it's going to take him a couple more years at the very least to figure out how to play winning basketball, right? And to try to give guys 10 minutes at a time to figure that out. I mean, that's why Wiseman is in the G League. And
you add an unlucky injury on top of it, and all of a sudden you're kind of in this situation where it's like, I mean, he really does just need like 6 months of like 25 minutes a game just to figure something out at some level.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's almost, I think of it like with Jordan too. Like Jordan came in, like he had a lot of skill set, like a lot of skills that I think were you could see translating right away, and he has a good feel for the game and knows how to assert himself. But like, I mean, just figuring out his shot and how to operate within the entire Warrior system while having some of those really good skills already took him, he needed the massive G League time before he got it and really figured things out at the end of that year before he really popped the next year too. And I mean, it's also extrapolated, like it has been lost to me, like not having Dante for a lot of the beginning of the season really hurt. Because I think he is like, again, still kind of finding his way offensively, but I think he does things that are going to matter and be important. But still, like you mentioned, I think it's just really hard to I think it's one thing to bring somebody along with smaller minutes loads because like I don't think that you just need to like force, not that you're saying this, but I think there's like this tendency to be like, oh well, this guy needs to be force fed pick and rolls and he'll figure things out. Like rarely does it work that way. Like I think you really need, for the most part, start off in a smaller role and then just build out from there as you start to collect skills. Like any coach or player development person I've talked to it's always about like, you have to do one thing at a time before you can really expand out to everything else. But again, it just comes down to, all right, well, when you have 4 guys who all need to be coming along at the same time and need to work on a lot of the same things, it makes it that much harder to actually do. And I think we just continue to see that kind of compound as an issue this year.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like this tees up the obvious thing, which is like this Warriors roster is unbalanced if the goal is to defend their title, right? So they're going to need to make some sort of move. And I feel like that's the decision they're going to have to come across. Like, are they ready to trade one of their lottery picks for a veteran? And, they run the risk that in a couple of years that may not look, that guy could pop for another team. They're all talented. It's not like a talent issue. It's like, but do they want to trade one of them for a veteran who can stabilize the bench and in process actually help make the other young players a little easier? Because if you're putting more veteran players around a Jonathan Kuminga, you can get something maybe that's more resemblant of what we saw last year, like you said, where, they put him out there with 3-4 veterans at a time, let him play kind of a very contained role. And he thrived at it for the most part. I thought he was better as a rookie than I expected him to be based upon what I saw in the G League Ignite. What I saw in the G League Ignite, I thought like, oh man, it's going to be a multi-year project. And, he still is, but he did have a positive impact. Yeah,
no, definitely. And I'm right in the same vein. Like, I think that, like, it's not even just one play. Like, I think they need probably 2 more guys to really fill out the bench. And it's not even just the bench. Like, for me, like, I don't know if San Antonio goes for it. I would love to see, like, I think Zach Lowe mentioned it today, but like a Wiseman and stuff for Jakob Poeltl. I don't think San Antonio should do it, but if that happened for the Warriors, I would be very in on
I think they should.
Yeah.
If I were them, I would take a shot. I mean, a rebuilding team. I mean, look, I'm
increase your odds of getting Wembanyama.
Poeltl's a good. Yeah.
What makes it tough is like Poeltl is, and a friend of mine just wrote about this, but like he's so good at doing the things that make it easier for role players to develop, or just players to develop. And like, that's part of why we're seeing Devin Vassell really pop this year. That's part of why we're seeing Keldon Johnson really grow. It's because Jakob does all the things that you really need to amplify players who handle the ball, which is why he would be perfect for Golden State.
I could just see Steve Kerr if he had a Pirtle, Ludi, 2-man tandem at the center spot, being the happiest man on earth. You know what I'm saying? Just like every press conference, like, I know Steph scored 50, but let me tell you about the screens that were set. Just every time.
The problem, I think, there for the Warriors is it's almost a salary dump because Pirtle's a free agent after. And so you're almost, I mean, unless you're re-signing him, I guess, right? But
there'll be teams who want him, though, and the Warriors, with their cap situation. So yeah, it's like you're kind of giving up on Wiseman. You're right, for a rental in some ways, right?
Yeah. Another one I would look at too. I think like it makes it harder just because I don't know what Utah's interest in Wiseman would be because they just drafted Walker Kessler.
So good, by the way, so good.
What? Yeah,
he's so good.
He's impressed me too. Like, I wasn't super high on him in the draft, but he's done some good things. But I think Kelly Olynyk would really help the Warriors too. I know, like, it's part of, like, I mean, Kelly Olynyk is really good, but also, like, it does pain me to say nice things about that man sometimes.
He is good. He is objectively good.
But yeah, I mean, especially adding a stretch element too, in the way that he would bring with his playmaking as well. And he's a fine defender. Like, I think he would fit in the scheme. But again, it's like, it does feel like shooting yourself in the foot. Like, damn, we really got to this point of having to do this.
Yeah. Do you you mentioned both the players you mentioned, by the way, are like very obvious fits for the way that the Warriors want to play. Like, I could see it just from a basketball disregard, like value, contract, all that stuff makes sense. Yeah. Do you think center though is the biggest need, or is this more of just like those are players that we keep hearing about are trade available and that's kind of where you're going with it? Because I could make a case that they need a wing off the bench a little more. You know, they lost Otto Porter and GP2. Granted, Otto, was a 4-5 for them. He's still kind of a wing by trade. Clay, he's going through it. And if his defense isn't, forget the jump shot, because at some point it's going to come around. If his defense isn't coming around,
really bad. Yeah,
it has been. I mean, he got better defensively in the playoffs last year than I expected at times, but he still had his issues with quicker guys, as you would expect. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I feel like outside of Wiggins, Steph's probably their second best defender on the perimeter anyway. In theory, you would like to add another wing more than anything.
Yeah, no, I think I normally like to like you're mentioning. I think it's more just like almost saying convenience is the wrong way to put it, because I do think Jakob and Kelly would actually really help, but it's more like when you have to move off of a center, I feel like most teams are just going to be reluctant to be like, all right, well, here's this wing who's really helpful for a center that we have to figure out how we're going to make this work. I think just by nature of how Trey's tend to work, I think that would be pretty difficult. But I agree too. Like I know it. Like, the numbers look really rough. I think JaMychal Green has been fine this year and would look a lot better if he had better players on the bench with him. So I think, like, in terms of actual wings, like, I'd have to think more about who's actually available. Like, if they could do something to get Kenrich Williams from OKC, I think that would actually help a lot. He's a good defender. The shot is, like, sometimes iffy, but I mean, again, it's the same as what we thought of coming with GP2 last year. Obviously different player, but same mindset. I just don't know who else is taking Wiseman,
Detroit,
I still think
maybe Detroit, Indiana.
Indiana
looks like you're an Indiana guy, right? So maybe you want to send Halliburton back here. He's supposed to be the guy. Yeah, Miles Turner obviously is the target there, right? So everybody wants Miles Turner. I don't know if Indiana wants to trade him. He's always on the trade block. So I don't know.
8 to 9 million think pieces on Miles Turner trades have happened over the last 5 years.
Some written by himself. Yeah.
We talked about Miles Turner ourselves 2 years ago when the Warriors were going through the exact same situation, just with other names like Andrew Wiggins. Now Andrew Wiggins is untouchable. But the Warriors are in a tough spot to where I think your point is right. I mean, they've got to make a move. His value is not high enough to where you're going to get a really good young player. Like Lauri Markkanen is one guy that's like on Utah that looks like he's going to be a star. So now you're stuck with a Kelly Olynyk who's just a solid vet, or Jakob Poeltl, who it feels like almost a dump, right? Where it's just like, well, okay, we're just going to give up on the kid for a guy that, Pirtle's not going to close playoff games. So it's
going to help you for 40 games, and then probably someone else is going to sign him in the offseason.
Is that worth it? I would say you can make an argument. Yes, honestly, you can make an argument. Yes, pretty easily because of Steph Curry, but I don't know if you can make that argument to Joe Lacob and get it approved. That's the question that I think the Warriors, that Bob Myers won't be able to. Anyway, we appreciate you, sir, for coming on with us.
Of course.
For a few.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, man, I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. I do have a weekly column that comes out on Fridays that will be out up at Dime Up Rocks next week. Not next week, tomorrow. Geez, been all over the place this week. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. That's where it'll be.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.